everyone. I just wanted to take a few minutes and go through the presentation about how achievements shaped Greek civilization. The achievements that the Greeks did were vast. They did a lot of different things, and a lot of those things that they created, we still use today. So they did a lot of achievements in science. When we look at the Greek civilization, we're looking at several thousand years of history. When the Greek civilization first started, the ancient Greeks were polytheistic. They believed in many different gods, and they believed that all those different gods controlled all of their aspects of daily life. As they continued to grow as a civilization and as years passed, people started thinking about different things, and that's where the field of science came about. So at first, the very, very first scientists rejected the idea. So they vetoed the idea that the gods and goddesses were responsible for everything. So Thales was the very first person that really put it out there to everyone that maybe there was another explanation as to why things happened. Maybe the reason why the sun went around and came up in the east and went down in the west wasn't because Apollo was pulling a chariot across the sky that carried the sun, but maybe it was because the earth was spinning on an axis. Maybe it was because we were part of a solar system. Um, and so that thinking led to many different people also looking at different aspects of science. So we have Archimedes, who was looking at physics, so kind of like the same stuff that Sir Isaac Newton was looking at, but way before him. And the idea about astronomy were other things. This is also our first idea of where the atom comes from. So we know about atoms and we know that matter is made up of atoms, but the very first person who thought about this was a guy named Democritus. And he was the one who invented the word atoms or atomos, meaning that which cannot be divided. So his original understanding of an atom isn't exactly 100% accurate in 2020, but it was amazing that they were able to think of the idea that if we keep dividing something smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, we eventually get to one single piece that is the essence of that item, which is pretty much what an atom is. So they really went from this idea of the gods and goddesses did everything, and it was because of that, to this idea that things happened because of nature and things happened because of a scientific explanation. Now, this doesn't mean that they stopped believing in their gods and goddesses. They just kind of put the two ideas together. With the invention of coming about in science, they also had math. So you need math in order to have science. Science is the application of math and language arts. And so we had this idea of triangles and algebra, and Hypatia, who was the first woman mathematician and astronomer who was given credit in her own right and not a husband or a brother or a father. If it wasn't for Pythagoras and for Euclid for triangles and algebra, we wouldn't be able to build the buildings that we have today, and the Greeks wouldn't have been able to build their buildings. They also did lots of things with painting and sculptures. They changed the way that they painted and sculpted was very different than earlier civilizations. They were very much on making things look realistic. What was the form of the human body? How can I sculpt that or paint that so it looks realistic as opposed to more abstract? This is a time of a lot of achievements in music and drama. So we have different plays that are being written and performed. We have different poets that are writing things. We have different musical instruments that are being created. They also use their science to help them with their drama. So when they made their auditoriums, these were outside and deliberately on purpose made into the side of a hill so that the actors that would be down here, they could talk and that their voices would be projected and everybody could hear them. So they didn't have any electricity at this time. They didn't have microphones and things like that. So, but they were able to use science in order to project their voices so everyone could hear them and see them. When we look at philosophy, this is where that idea of coming together and this idea of coming together and thinking about things and thinking about things differently. So philosophy is the study of how people should behave or what an ideal political system looks like. So philosophy is really like thinking about thinking. And the very, very first person that we give credit to is Socrates. And Socrates really thought that if people knew what was right and what was wrong, then they would behave and they would choose right over wrong. And then he had one of his best students or most famous students was Plato. And Plato is given a lot of credit to figuring out what is the best way to govern. So like, how should leaders behave? How should people in power treat people who don't have power? And if we can find the best way to do that, then we can have a really, really positive society. His most famous student was Aristotle. And Aristotle you can thank for how we have education today. So Aristotle thought that everyone should be able to go to school. And when I say everyone, I really just mean he thought boys should go to school. This is still a time where women didn't have a whole lot of rights. But he created the first schools, and he created the scientific method of asking a question, coming up with a possible answer, designing an experiment to test to see if that answer is correct, making observations during that test, looking at the results of that test, coming to a conclusion, and then deciding where that information takes you. Does it take you to a new question? Does it take you to changing what you thought was the right answer to a different answer? Does it take you to creating a new experiment? So he really came up with the idea of how we conduct science today and how we teach in a school setting. Um, Socrates did have schools as well. It's known as the Socratic method. And he made people very frustrated sometimes because he wouldn't answer questions. He would only ask questions. So if you asked him a question, he wouldn't give you an answer, but he would ask another question that he would make you answer. And the idea being that the more questions that you answer yourself, the more you understand something. So these ideas of thinking about thinking, or philosophy, and the ideas of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle are still very much used today in 2020. If it wasn't for the ancient Greeks, we may not have the medicine and the healthcare that we have today. So, this guy, Hippocrates, is known as the father of medicine. He was the first doctor. He was, again, part of that group with Thales who started to go, maybe it isn't the gods that are mad at us and that's why we get sick, but maybe we get sick because of something that we eat or drink, or maybe we get sick because of something in the environment. And maybe there is something that we can eat or drink or use in the environment to make us better. And so he did a lot of science, and he did a lot of studying and observations and seeing what worked and what didn't work. And then he wrote it all down, and we still have a lot of that writing today. He also created the Hippocratic Oath, which is an oath that doctors take. The essence of the oath is to do no harm, meaning that doctors are going to try to help you, and whatever they're going to do, it is meant to help and not to hurt, and that they will only use their knowledge to help people and not to hurt people. A lot of the architecture of the ancient Romans, or I'm sorry, the ancient Greeks, you will see in 2020, mainly because of the columns that they came up with. So these are three different designs of columns: the Doric, the Ionic, and the Corinthian. It just means if they're really, really fancy or maybe not so fancy. But they used them to create their buildings. They created the idea of gutters so that rain would run off the roof and would be moved away from the building as opposed to straight down at the side of the structure of the building and then make the foundation all wet. Uh, the cool thing about their columns that they made, especially when they made the Parthenon, which was the largest building they made, is that they made the columns look straight, even though they actually aren't straight. So what they did is they would make them, and they would make them a little bit bigger in the middle and then come back out again. And then when they came out like that, to the eye, it makes it look like it's completely straight, even though it's actually bulging. Because if they didn't do that, it would make it look like it was coming in like an hourglass. So it was coming in and going out. So it would look super skinny in the center. And so it was an optical illusion. And they figured that out using math and using science to create their architecture. So as I was saying, we use a lot of these things in a lot of the things that the ancient Greeks created, we still use today. We still use a lot of the scientific methods and the ideas that they came up with. For science, you guys have algebra and geometry, pies. I put out I found an image from Alex that shows that you're doing different things with math that was invented by Euclid and Pythagoras. We still have sculptures and music and drama, and I found a play that was done that was first written in ancient Greece time that was performed in January of this year. The internet is a wonderful thing for finding pictures. And it also helps us with our learning. We also still go to school, and we have democracy, which is ruled by the people, meaning that everyone gets a say rather than just a small piece. And we'll get more into democracy in the next video as we review the politics or the government of ancient Greece. As I said, the Hippocratic Oath we use, and we still have a lot of these buildings that, building styles, I should say. So we using those columns ideas. This is the Parthenon. So you can read a couple different articles about the Parthenon. It was a temple to Athena in Athens. So this is the Parthenon here. So that's a little bit about the achievements that we used before and that the ancient Greeks created and we still use today. I hope this video helps a little bit if you got confused a little bit on the achievements. You can also use this information to help you with your achievements research project. If you have any questions, please make sure you contact me. I look forward to hearing from all of you. Thank you.